So, Catherine, what are we going to do today?
We're going to learn how to flat pack.
Why would you want to do that?
Because the drop zone near us flat packs.
What is the first thing you want to say about skydiving? Is it dangerous?
Yes. Side effects may include you can get injured or sometimes die. And we are not responsible for what you use with the information in this video.
So should people consult with a parachute rigger or a professional packer before trying to do any of this stuff by themselves?
Yes.
Why are we doing a video on flat packing other than it's because that's what people do around here?
Well, there's a lot of videos on pro packing nowadays, but not enough videos on flat packing, and I don't think everybody wants to listen to Billy Webbers. So, Dad, why do you want a flat pack?
Well, a couple of reasons that you might want a flat pack. Number one, I think it's really good for students because it helps them to see how everything is laid out, and it's a little bit simpler. One of the reasons that people flat pack is that it can be easier to pack a malfunction when you're pro packing. That's an opinion that I have and several other people also have. And, flat packing, it's been around for a while. And honestly, I think the biggest reason that people don't flat pack so much is that flat packing takes up more space. So if you're really busy drop zone, it's a downside for flat packing that you take up the space of 2 to 3 pro packers. Another plus for flat packing, you don't need a packing weight either. So it can be a little bit simpler. So for those reasons, we thought we would make this video and share with you today. So what are the rules, Catherine?
Okay. Everything has to be symmetrical. Lines have to be straight. Lines have to be in the middle. Fabric on the outside. And slider has to be all the way up.
All right, so those are the basics, and if you follow those basic rules, it's probably going to work out okay, right?
Yeah!
All right, let's get started. All right, so Catherine, what you got?
Okay, well, we just set down the rig. It depends on if you have the collapsible slider things next
Which
to it.
most people do.
Yeah. So, we need to, uncollapse the slider.
Right? And what about the brakes? What should you do with those right now?
You can set your brakes right now.
Yeah, some people will set their brakes right now, and other people will not. So a lot of people think that it's easier to lay out the parachute when you flat pack if you don't set the brakes just yet. But it's up to you. Other people set them now. So we'll proceed without setting them at the moment. But you do want to have them on to the risers so they're not flopping around or anything weird. So now what is it time to do?
Now it's time to walk the lines.
Let's walk the lines. Right. So you want to go ahead and grab your slider, grab it by the back, the part with the tabs for collapsing it. Grab the rear lines in one hand and the front lines in the other, and then walk it up.
You also want to make sure you're not pulling the rig when you do this.
All right, so once you've gotten the lines walked all the way up, what are you going to do now?
Shake it.
Shake and bake. All right, so I'm going to shake it. You just want to get everything nice and loosened. It plays at 120 miles an hour, so you can shake it pretty hard and you're not going to destroy it.
Then you take a step back and...
All right, so you want to just take a step back and you want to try to throw it out in front of you as much as possible. So now what's next? You threw it and it's on the ground.
Okay, now we flake the tail.
All right, so how do we do that?
Basically, you grab all cells and you have to make sure you have them all.
Is this easier if you have packing tabs?
Yes it is.
Does this canopy that you're working with have packing tabs?
No.
It does not. Okay. So it's still possible. It's just a little bit harder.
6, 7, 8, and 9.
All right. So how many cells should you have?
This is a 9-cell parachute, but other ones may have 7, so yeah.
Is it always an odd number?
Generally, yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a center cell.
Yeah. So now we're going to grab this and plug it, and plug it, and again, and we take each slide. It's not a slide.
Cell.
Each cell. And we move it over here. And as you can see, sometimes the lines aren't straight, so you just tug. So Dad, why do we want to keep these lines straight?
Because that's one of our rules.
Why is it one of our rules?
Because when the lines are straight and they're in the middle, you have a lot less chance of problems. When the lines aren't straight and tight, then you can get things like tension knots and other issues with your deployment. Okay, so once you flaked your tail, the lines should be mostly on top of each other for your C and D lines, and the control lines, of course, will be back by themselves. So if I go around to the other side of the canopy, I can see that it looks pretty orderly on the tail. It's not extremely important that this is perfect. As long as it's somewhat organized, you'll probably be fine. Notice that my lines are tight, and that's the biggest thing that we want. So over here on this end, we can see that everything looks fairly tidy. And now we want to flake the nose without messing up our work from before. So we're going to do something similar. We don't have packing tabs again, so in this case, we're going to grab the cells and just gently tug and keep the lines tight, and then we will flip the nose back and forth, and from there, we will flake the nose. All right, so you've gone ahead and you've gotten the lines, the B lines, nice and straight and tight, and now you're just gonna flop it. There you go. So now you want to flake it, and a lot of people will take it and they'll flip it back and start flaking at the bottom. And then there's Catherine. She's just gonna flake it without flipping it backwards.
What?
So this next step is something that some people like to do. They like to roll the nose to get a slower opening. If you're happy with the way your canopy opens, you probably don't need to do this. But if you want a little slower opening, this is something that you can certainly do. All right, so you want to go ahead and flake the nose. Take your cells, pull them up to the side. Some people will just flake them all, and some people also will roll it. So it's kind of up to you. If you want a slower opening, you can roll it, but you really don't have to on most canopies. Okay, so let me just show you how you could roll it if you choose to do so. It's a little hard because we're a little bit cramped here at home, but I'm going to count out 4 cells. And I'm going to roll it, and you want to roll it along this axis here in the front. So just go ahead and roll it. And about there is good for this canopy. And then grab your other cells. Grab the front and roll them in toward the canopy. Same amount, like so. So now we're ready to start folding. So now we're going to set the brakes. And this is the same no matter how you pack. All right, so to set the brakes, toggles through the loop, put it into the keeper, give it a tug, make sure it's nice and tight, and different rigs will have different ways of stowing the toggle. Some of them have Velcro, like this rig, and some of them have something else. you don't know what to do, consult a rigger or a professional packer. So now we're ready to fold. So you want to grab right at the front by the A lines and grab right on top of your B lines. Bring your A lines on top of the B lines.
Isn't it the B lines on top of the...
That's correct. I was just testing Catherine, and she passed. And then you want to grab the C lines and put those on top of the B lines, and then the D lines on top of the C lines. So once you've finished folding, you can take the control lines and just let them be off to the side for now. And now it's time to bring up your slider. And when you do that, these lines will get in a lot tighter to each other. And remember the slider all the way up to the stops. All right, so now you should have your lines going to a nice little point, a nice little V pattern. And at this point, you want to take your brake lines or control lines, and you want to flake material. So you want to grab an end seam and follow it around. Now, a nice thing about this particular canopy is that the lines are color-coded, which comes in real handy if you pro pack, which we're not doing today, but
Still comes in handy.
still comes in handy. So I've got the lines in the middle, fabric to the outside there, and I'll do the same thing on the other side. So at this point, you want to grab the middle, your center cell, which usually is right on the label, but in this case, for this canopy, there's a tab, but there's a seam. So either way, you should be able to figure it out. And then you can pull it down, and you're ready to start packing this thing up, making a little cigar, and put it in the bag.
We're gonna make the cigar shape, which...
So again, slider all the way up to the stops. Bring this down. Put your knees on it. And you want to start working the air out of your canopy. Now you can either use your arm or you can lay on the canopy. One thing I suggest, especially if it's your canopy, if you're all sweaty, laying on your canopy is bad. That sweat will actually attack the fabric. So luckily I'm not sweating today, so I'm going to go ahead and just put my pelvis here and then lie down on my canopy and just work out some of the air.
The only way to get a break at this job. I'm not lying down, I'm releasing air.
Alright. Now everyone has their own way of doing this, but what I like to do is I'll start here at the bottom and I'll just start wrapping. So we'll take this material here, kind of bring it in, roll it upward. Same thing here. Bring this in, roll it upward. I'm going to take this material from my center cell and wrap it around. Like so. I'm going to start down here. I'm going to go underneath. And what you can't see is I'm taking this stuff together and kind of twisting it a little bit. Now you want to keep this center seam nice and straight, and that will ensure that things are somewhat orderly underneath. So you can see here, I kind of dress this down a little bit. This should be about the width of your deployment bag. Now, again, if you don't want to be on your canopy a lot, you can use your forearms and kind of work some of the air out like so. Move up with your knees. Around the back.
So, Dad, do you also have to do this in pro packing?
Yeah, it's got to go in the bag no matter how you folded it. So this is pretty much the same regardless of packing method. Although that's not completely true because there are some packing methods that involve things like rolling this into a tube instead of S-folding. Here I have a little bit of air. I'm just going to go ahead and lie down on this.
This part is the most frustrating part of packing, according to some people. This is just like an opinion. You have to get the cigar perfectly tight so that it will be able to fit in that.
Alright, so as I said, there's different ways of going about getting this in the bag. Some things I will say, not that I'm an expert in this. One thing, a lot of people stress about it, making it look super pretty. My pack jobs usually don't look that pretty, but they do seem to work. So, just remember, parachutes want to open, and don't get overly stressed about it, or you'll never skydive. And you do have a reserve that's virtually guaranteed to work. So some people at this point would start S-folding and then put that into the bag. Some other people will actually put one end in the bag and then fold it. Whatever works for you.
So what are we doing?
Why don't we go ahead, put one end in the bag. So I'm going to get this just a little bit narrower, a little bit
So it
tighter.
will actually fit in the bag.
So I'm going to move up here, grab this, and take some of this fluff, and roll it underneath.
So Dad, any reason why people should want to skydive?
Well, they should want to skydive because it's a lot of fun.
Any advice for new skydivers?
Skydive as much as you can. Now, something else you should do at this point, you have a collapsible pilot chute. Now is about a good time to go ahead and cock it. Probably should have done this before I put this into the bag, but I think it's still fine, and it is. This is a fairly new pilot chute, so my indicator is still working in the little window. Sometimes it doesn't work so well, but you can verify that, yep, this thing seems to catch air. So back to putting this in the bag. Just sort of started it. And from here, I want to grab about midway. I'm going to grab underneath. Put my hand here. Bring it up. Do a fold. Grab all my lines. Make sure everything is nice and tight still. Grab my material. Go around. And make another little fold. Like so. Now, as I said, this is probably not the prettiest, but it seems to work all right. So now I'm going to keep this compressed. I'm going to reach around here. What some people will do, they will actually put their knee. As long as your knee is on this side of the bag, you're okay. And then I can just sort of pivot this up and put it in the bag. Now, one thing, a lot of people have the wrong philosophy. They're trying to put this in the bag. But don't think of putting this in the bag. Think of putting the bag around the parachute. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and just flip it up. Seems like I have a little air. That's okay. I'm just going to squeeze it out. Like so. And now I want to start making my stows. And again, remember, before we said everything should be symmetrical. I want to make sure that's still the case. It's looking pretty good. My risers are even down there by my rig. I want to take the grommet to the rubber band, not the rubber band to the grommet. You go through a lot less rubber bands this way. So I'll just take my rubber band. And the other thing is, if your stow bands in particular look bad, replace them. You don't want them to break on your jump. It's not a good thing. All right, So I'm going to milk these lines. I'm going to get a nice bite of line, like so. Take it around. And there we go. First stow done. I can go ahead and tuck this in a little bit more. Got my second locking stow. This particular D bag only has 2. Some of them have 4. Grab my lines. Get a nice bite. Like so.
And you do not double loop these rubber bands.
Exactly. The locking stow should never be double banded. It's okay to double band the others if they're loose, but never, ever, ever on the locking stows. So now I can go ahead and do the other stows. All right, so now one question that a lot of people have is how much line should you leave between your risers and your D-bag? And that's a good question, and different people would give you different answers to that particular question. Now, Brian Germain, among some other folks, recommends 2.5 to 3 feet of line. Other people will say less. It's a subject of debate. I tend to agree with Brian and say 2.5 to 3 feet is pretty good. So let me show you why this is and why you should care about this. So I'm going to take my bag, I'm going to pull it up, and I'm just going to place it in the container for now. Now it's time to dress my risers. So I want to take my risers and bring them over, like so. Now one thing, you should always have the toggles on the inside. Pretty much any rig. Now, of course, as always, consult the manufacturer's instructions if you're not sure how they go for your rig. So I'll just pull these over the top, nice and neat. All right, so back to the lines. What you want to have is lines that are not tight to the bottom of the reserve container. So what you want to do, no matter how much line you have, is you want to take this out to the corners of the container. So the idea is this: you do not want this to snag on the reserve container as it's deployed. If that happens, you can get line twists, and generally we don't like line twists. So if you're like me and you have some excess line, no problem. All you need to do is to neatly swirl it into your container. Now, of course, at some point you're going to need a pull-up cord, so let me grab one of those. So now, what you want to do is grab your D-bag, rotate it like so, your bridle out of the way, grab the sides, push down like this with your knees. What this is going to do for you is this will get your canopy into the corners of the container. Now, you're ready to start closing. So in this container, it's the bottom first. That's pretty typical. And I'm going to use my hand in order to help me get this up in place. Now, here's something else I've seen people do. So I've seen some people struggle with this. Put your knee on the loop so it's locking the loop in place. Sometimes I've seen people just put their knee on the container, and that's not bad. It's going to compress things, but it's not going to keep the loop from slipping back out. So I keep my knee on there. I feed it through the next flap. Pull it down. Knee back on it.
So Dad, for the next one that you do, does it matter which side that you do?
Probably not. Most people go right and left. You can go left and right. There's a lot of things in life and in skydiving that don't really matter, but some people like to argue about. Again, consult the manufacturer's instructions, and they might tell you their preference. Alright, so now I've got my loop. Notice I have plenty of loop sticking out. I put in my pin, like so, and a little bit about putting in the closing loop, how I've routed the bridle. Some manufacturers, especially if it's an older manufacturer like this one, might tell you that the bridle should come up and then the closing pin goes in and then it comes down. Right? Whatever you do, you should never have this bridle wrapped around the flap. Again, consult a manufacturer or a rigger or a professional packer if you're not sure what to do. Something else that you might want to consider, this is another recommendation. Again, this one comes from Brian Germain as well. Don't have bridle underneath this pin. And the reason for that is if you have bridle underneath this pin, what's happened a few times is when people went to pull, the pin actually poked through the bridle. So if you go online, you go on YouTube, and you look up some of Brian Germain's videos, he has a video, I think it's called Closing Thoughts, all about this. I would recommend you have a look at that, and you can make your own decisions. Right. So now, what do we have to do? We have to get the pull-up cord out. So you want to wrap it underneath, pull it till it pops. And why are we doing this?
So that the pull-up cord doesn't rub against the pin.
Right. So now, instead of the pull-up cord being between the pin and the closing loop, it's between closing loop and nothing. So it's in a little air gap there, if you will. And now I can pull it a little bit more easily. I want to pull it nice and slow. I don't want to
upset
have
the rig.
Too much friction. I don't want to upset my rig. I don't want to wear my closing loop. That's the whole idea. All right. So now I can even see that my parachute, pilot chute, is still cocked. And I can take this material here. In my case, I have a little Velcro strip. And I'll take this excess and just tuck it up in here. Now, make sure you have some slack on either side of this in order to ensure that the closing pin is extracted easily and properly. Also, we want to make sure that your closing pin is all the way in. We're almost done. The only thing that's left to do is
the pilot chute.
Pilot chute. All right, so here's another recommendation. This one also comes from Mr. Germain. So he has a lot of good packing recommendations. He also has some videos on how to pack. Not on how to flat pack, though, of course. That's not as popular today. So here's what I think is a good way to do your pilot chute. Just lay it out like so. Grab it by the middle, go to an edge, and then make a half move. Right. So number one advantage of this method, you cannot do this if you didn't cock your pilot chute. So if you forgot to cock your pilot chute, It's not going to work. So that's a plus. The other plus for this is that if you have a horseshoe malfunction and you follow this procedure, it's probably going to pull your pilot chute for you if your D-bag and stuff comes out. So that's a nice thing. It's not going to bunch up or anything. Again, look online and you can see some of Brian's videos. So now I'm going to take this, I'm going to fold it in thirds, fold it in half, and now I'm going to start working on the bridle. Alright, so now you can take your pilot chute. Another recommendation from Mr. Germain, take it and put it right on a container. This way you know how much bridle you need to leave out. You don't have a lot of excess bridle. I'm going to go ahead and hold it like so. So, a couple of things. You want to make sure that the bridle is coming out the top, not the bottom. Fold this up, down, and just roll it together. Now you see I have a little bit of a twist in mine. I'm just going to untwist that real quick. Alright, and I'm going to bridle cover in place, and this guy is now good to go. So just real quick to show you why he recommends that particular procedure. If I grab the bridle here and I pull on the bridle, out comes my pilot chute, and it didn't bunch up or anything. So that is how you can flat pack a parachute.
Hey guys, just remember to buy Dad's new book.
What's my new book about?
USB forensics with Python scripting. And remember to fly safe. Bye.